I was on day 3 of southbound duty when I found the first one, just past Slaughter Lane where the frontage road kisses the right shoulder and the rumble strip hums if you drift. I'd been awake since 0400, coffee shaking a little in the cup, the dawn color coming in slow over the sound wall. Dispatch put it out as debris. I rolled up with my lights low to keep the eastbound commuters from rubbernecking, and there she was, a body laid out like a demonstration. Ankles together, palms up, chin tilted toward the brightening sky. Her hair was combed back neatly like the wind had nothing to say about it. There were no tire tracks cutting the gravel, no drag marks, no blood. She looked like someone had set her there with the care you give a fragile package and then stepped away without leaving a footprint. I remember how quiet it felt in that slice of morning. Traffic hissed and thickened and broke, and it still didn't disturb the composition of the scene. The way her shoulders squared to the white line made me take a half step left before I realized what bothered me. She'd been aligned. Not, she happened to end up straight. Aligned, like a survey mark no one could see. I'm Marcus Rodriguez, trooper out of San Marcos. I know that stretch of I-35 in my bones, where the pavement ripples, which cameras are dummies, where DPS likes to sit in the merged shadows. Death on the road has shapes that repeat, drunk, drowsy, angry, and you get good at recognizing them. This was none of those. We locked down the shoulder, the me rolled. I took statements from a pair of stunned contractors who'd pulled over to call it in. While we waited on forensics, I counted the reflector posts and looked at the exit sign and caught myself checking my own stance against the white line. Like if I walked into the right angle, I'd understand. My dashcam clock read 5:52. You could still smell the wet in the air. I wrote it up and tried to put it in the bucket labeled unknowns that will be known later. The bucket didn't hold. 3 nights after, a second body turned up near FM 306 outside New Braunfels, placed the same way. Marines have this phrase for when something obvious connects to something you don't see yet, a whisper in the wires. That whisper got louder. The third body, northbound, just past Schertz Parkway, felt like a hand tapping the map. The task force grew by accretion. Local PDs, Behar County, Hayes, Comel, then the bureau slid in their chairs and their laptops. We worked in a windowless conference room that used to be an EOC. The map went up on the wall, red pins along the spine of 35 like a rash. Someone's analyst, kid with a neat beard and a nervous leg, laid a clear plastic sheet over the pins and, as a joke, maybe as a way to break tension, pulled up a star chart of the southern sky on his phone. He lined Orion to the frontage roads and grinned. We didn't laugh. It wasn't because anyone thought stars were involved. It was because order was there and we were too tired to decide if that comforted or scared us. I drove more nights than I slept, sliding the Crown Vic along the lane lines with the tires singing a soft, low note, listening to dispatch breathe. The third and fourth victims matched like stamps. No sexual assault, no defensive wounds. Cuts so fine the me had to point them out with a gloved fingernail. Sedation, they said. The tox screens came back with the kind of anesthetics you only get if you're in a hospital or if you know enough to steal quietly. He washed them, too. The coroner showed us the scrubbed cuticles. He shaved a corner of the hairline to harvest a strand root like it was a plant. Everything done with the steady, unhurried hands of someone who never rushes. At the border of midnight and 1, I pulled outside a Buc-ee's in New Braunfels for fuel and wondered how much of my life had been logged by cameras that didn't care whether I was the good guy. I tapped the fob under my dash, the TX tag. We all had one. Even if we weren't supposed to on duty, because radio miles and toll road minutes don't always line up with the shape of a human night. I thought about that star chart overlay and asked our own analyst, Melanie, to generate a response time heat map for that corridor, where an EMS rig would be delayed, where 911 calls handoff between counties, where cell coverage dipped. Blues and reds bled on the screen. The pins sat in the gaps like teeth in a wound. If he's staging them where we're slow, Melanie said, he knows our gaps. How? I asked, but the answer was already in the room, in the way his cuts were clean, in the silence of their throats. Paramedic, or nurse, or one of those techs who go where the disaster tents pop up. Someone who lives inside blinds where people panic. We built a list. Volunteer rosters for marathons, for BCS games, for F1 at CODA. Disaster drills, traffic control details. A name kept appearing on sign-in sheets like a watermark, Thomas Crenshaw. He wasn't always spelled the same. Krenz, but the signatures shared a rhythm that a handwriting analyst would later call deliberate left slope. He had legit certs and a steady stream of per diem contracts. Not flashy, the sort of guy you call when a second ambulance is late. I said his name out loud in my car one night to see how it felt. A lot of names feel like air. This one felt like a weight. The fifth body dropped at a rest area south of San Antonio. Media got the story and gave him a name. We didn't, because cops don't like to feed the thing we're hunting. I sat at my desk with a Whataburger that had cooled to a congealed sculpture and stared at the positions. Slaughter, 306, shirts, loop 410, then a long southbound jump, spacing decreasing each time. Melanie drew bars between them and whistled. It's a countdown. To what? Someone asked. Silence then, and I heard my own voice answer. The border. That idea took hold. Coordination with DPS troopers north and south grew frantic. We started saturating the gaps. I sat on medians and on the lips of exit ramps, watched taillights stream like molten metal, and imagined him somewhere with a schedule I didn't yet know. You can live in an interstate long enough that the restaurants turn to lit rooms without context where the cashiers hand you food like priests. Everything becomes a ritual. So when I noticed the numbers again, it wasn't mystical. It was habit. Exit numbers with double digits. Badges with double digits. Mine had 2 5s. Slaughter's exit was 225. Shirts was 174. I told myself I was tired and chasing a shadow. And then I saw how the last 3 positions, if you mapped them as points and extended their lines, triangulated a place that wasn't the border at all. It was Kukula. Specifically, the truck stop where I always bought the cheap coffee with the burn ring on the counter, the one with the pump that coughed before it clicked. I'd mentioned that pump in a dashcam clip once, a joke about the pump sounding like a smoker, and I'd submitted that clip to evidence as part of a hit and run. Our evidence locker had been audited by outside contractors that quarter. One of the auditors? A temp from a medical staffing agency who'd been pulling double shifts. I got very cold. I pulled my toll transponder logs. Not official, not strictly kosher, but nothing about that week was. There, in data that looked like a shrug to anyone else, were my habits in the form of timestamps. He didn't need the stars. He had me lit from the inside by the devices I carried to make the world easier. I told none of that to anyone. I should have. Pride and shame carry the same mask. I filled out the daily patrol route like always and highlighted the places we'd agreed to sit. When the night yawned open and the shift turned soft, I stayed south, farther than I needed to be for any stated purpose. The radio hissed. My throat felt lined with cold paper. The Kitula stop sits back a little from the freeway, across a flat of littered gravel where bottles roll like bones. I cut my lights before I turned off, not tactically, just because I always did that there. Habit. The lot was half empty. A stale breeze pushed a smell of diesel and old heat. An ambulance was parked at the edge of the light wash. Rear doors cracked like a yawn. The unit number was a magnetic strip, new and too clean, and it didn't match the wear on the paint. A TxDOT vest was thrown over the bumper with the casualness of a man who has 30 seconds to come back and wants his hands free. Every fiber in me said leave. Call it in. Flood the lot with strobes and bodies. I eased the cruiser to a stop and took one breath to imagine the report I wanted to write later. Then I got out and let the night touch my face. EMS. I called. My voice came out too small. The radio at my shoulder remained silent. I approached the ambulance at an angle, the way they teach you to keep your own reflection from blinding you, and saw the interior lit in a soft, medical way. Instruments laid out on a stainless steel tray like a museum display. No blood. No chaos. A roll-up pouch open like a blue flower. Airway blades for catheters, tourniquet, syringes. One of those syringes had a label I knew from trainings, succinylcholine. Fast, final paralysis. You don't give that without a plan for a tube and a ventilator. You don't give it to someone you want to talk. Trooper, a voice said. Behind me. Close. Warm. Calm. Tones you use on bad nights so no one falls off the cliff. I turned. He wasn't giant. He wasn't movie monster anything. Average height, short hair, a face that would never be the center of a group photo. Hands empty. Vest off. Plain clothes that screamed support staff. He walked toward me like we already agreed on something. Let it pass, he said. Whatever sensation you're about to call fear, just write it out. I checked his hands again without moving my head and realized he hadn't come for my gun. He came for my wrist. He was close enough to smell the antiseptic on his skin before he moved. When he grabbed, it wasn't aggressive so much as efficient. An index on my radial, thumb behind my palm to fold it, the syringe in his other hand a small white comet. I jerked back and we hit the door and went hard into metal. Something snapped in my shoulder like a book spine opening. My sidearm stuck in the holster like it lived there. He didn't try to take it. He pushed my forearm flat against the door and turned my wrist up, and I watched the needle tip like people watch seconds hand on a clock. I think I shouted. I know I produced sound. He was talking in low syllables. Breathe, breathe. You'll feel the wave. Like I was a panic patient. The needle bit through the glove, and a cold bloom rushed along the webbing of my thumb. Pins and heat, and a sudden awareness of my tongue as an object. It wasn't the full hit. He missed a vein. He swore once, not losing his calm, just adjusting the plan. Reached for the tourniquet, and that tiny delay shoved a wedge of chance between us. I slammed the door. His hand was in the hinge, and the metal met bone with a wet, final sound. He hissed, still controlled. The syringe dropped. I drove my shoulder into him and felt something new tear in me. Pain flared like a photographed lightning strike. We went down. He was still trying to cradle me like a patient even as he fought me, positioning without rage, knees placed to immobilize, attention flicking not to my gun, but to my airway. He wanted my breath. He wanted to time it. I got my radio to my mouth with my left hand and said words that weren't the code but were close enough. Lot, ambulance, unknown unit, officer needs. But my voice had gone strange and slow, and I heard it and wanted to cry. He rolled us, so he was between me and the aisle, his good hand seeking the bag valve mask. He was going to intubate me on a truck stop floor. He was aroused by the idea, not sexually, but in some cleaner, colder way. The way carpenters love tight joints. I found his injured hand with my knee and put my weight on it, and he made a sound that broke the tone. That got me a second. I wrenched free enough to get my gun up, and he looked at it like it was a household object, not a thing that made holes. If you shoot, he said, you won't be able to tell me when it started. When what started? The pattern, he said, and smiled. And there it was. He'd pulled my toll logs, my routes, my habits. Maybe he'd just watched long enough from a median under the same sodium lights I had. And he'd threaded me into his geometry. You kept regular time. I appreciated that. Blue was coming from the edge of the lot, faint at first. He heard it, calculated speed versus distance, and did something like a shrug. We're out of minutes. Then, as if to prove the world was his metronome, he lunged not for me, but for his kit, the one with the blade, and I fired. Not center mass. Hand. Wrist. The instrument went spinning, clattered under the cot. His eyes changed for the first time, not fear, but reconsideration, and then he ran. He didn't sprint. He moved with that same efficient gait, a man who knows exactly how far he has to be before you can't catch him. I struggled to stand, airway feeling like a door someone was slowly leaning against from the inside. The other units swung in, strobes washing the ambulances inside in cheap disco, and men shouted my name. They got their hands on me and on him, and the night shattered into fragments. Gauze, the shocky laugh of someone who found the syringe under the cot, the ME's camera flash in my head, even though he wasn't there. Later, at Southwest General, a resident with tired eyes explained what a small subcutaneous dose of succinylcholine does to a body that's adrenalized. You got lucky, she said. I tried to say, I don't feel lucky, but my tongue belonged to somebody else for a while. We turned the ambulance inside out. The placards were fake, but the gear was real and logged to a hospital supply closet where a temp had filled a shift once. A temp named something like Crenshaw if you stood on one foot and squinted. In his kit we found cut lengths of fishing line, a cheap laser measure, a pocket notebook where he'd drawn grids with dots that weren't stars but times. Response times, tower handoff gaps, patrol shift changes. He'd built his theater from our blind spots. There were no trophies. There was a list of numbers that, in the wrong light, could have been a phone number, could have been a plate, could have been my badge. They booked him under his latest ID. He stared past the camera. He stared past me. I went home after 40 hours and sat on the back steps with the dog I only saw in the daylight maybe twice a week. My wife tucked a blanket around my shoulders like a TV cliche, and I let her. The sun climbed. The world kept time. I stared at my hand where a yellow bruise bloomed in the shape of a thumb and told myself I had reset the clock. But here is the thing I haven't said to anyone who fills out forms for a living. When I drive past Slaughter now, I don't see the body anymore. I see the unbroken white line and the way it points. In sleep, I hear a metronome ticking, not in seconds, but in intervals. 3 minutes, 7 minutes, 9 minute 32. And they are all the places in that corridor where a call would bounce and hold. They feel like music only he can hear. I keep telling myself we caught him. It doesn't matter what he hears. 2 weeks later, an ambulance with the right number and the right decals parked in a lot north of San Marcos for a call. Normal, routine. A trooper I know by coffee preference pulled in and shot me a text of a joke we can't make in public. I looked at the picture and felt the world tilt by a degree too small to measure. I zoomed in. The tourniquet on the bench seat was laid out in a figure 8, not a loop. No one coils it like that unless someone taught them in a specific class. It's nothing. It's habit. It's a shape on a bench. I deleted the text. I didn't sleep. Sometime after midnight, I drove to Cayula and stood where my pump coughs before it clicks, and I watched the lot. The ambulance bay across town belched and swallowed units with an indifferent hunger. The night hummed. People think horror is a scream and a door slam. It can be, but mostly it is a learned cadence. You spend long enough beating your route into the same steps, and someone will step into them with you, heel to toe, hand to wrist, breath to breath, and call it a dance. I still drive the same highway. I still count the reflector posts. Sometimes I press my palm to my own throat while I breathe, just to feel the pulse, and I count. 1, 2, 3. Not because I'm afraid it will stop, because I'm terrified it won't, and he'll be there inside the numbers, measuring it with me. They call it Valley Fog, like it belongs to us, like we're proud of it. On Highway 83 in January, it doesn't roll in so much as it grows out of the ground, up from the irrigation canals and citrus groves, thick enough to make your high beams feel like a sin. I grew up in Harlingen. I could smell it before I saw it. Wet grapefruit peel and diesel, damp pasture, and the sugary rot of a roadside stand closed for the season. You learn to drive by memory and mile marker. You count reflectors and listen to the rumble strip like Braille. I was on the early side of the night shift when the wrong way call started. Possible wrong way driver, westbound 83 near Laferia. Dispatch said, voice clipped, more annoyed than scared. Those calls pop every winter when visibility goes to hell. It's almost always someone confused by frontage roads, or a retiree in a beige sedan who misses the split and knows it immediately. You light them up, escort them off, and they cry because they could have killed someone. Then you file and move on. Except this one vanished. 2 units searched, found nothing but churned fog and a pair of flares guttering at an on-ramp that TxDOT swore they hadn't touched. An hour later, Mercedes. An hour after that, Progresso. Every time we were chasing a ghost car down a corridor our cameras couldn't see and our radios stabbed through like sewing needles. The calls lined up too neatly with ALPR pings, license plates from high-end SUVs, plates that had hit our cameras in Brownsville and now ticked west without ever showing again. The kind of vehicles that come with concierge service and apps that warm your seats before you get out of bed. I started clipping those pings to an overlay on my MDT, and the points drew a soft crescent shape around the old citrus belt warehouses. The fog didn't break there as quickly. It sat low, pulled by windbreak rows. If you were going to make people doubt direction, you'd do it there. By midnight, I'd already been to 2 scenes where drivers swore a blacked-out SUV, maybe a Tahoe, maybe a Suburban, hit them with a high beam and a hand wave, as if it were guiding them, pointing toward a lit arrow board that said wrong way in orange pixels. You see that board and you obey. The road is a language, signs are grammar. No one ignores grammar when their feet hurt and the world has turned to milk. TxDOT didn't deploy a board. The dispatcher told me flat. No planned closures tonight. Private contractor? I asked. Negative. I drifted the cruiser to the shoulder and watched the fog pulse under the sodium lamps like breath. The way it reflected off retroreflective lettering on the wrong way signs made my stomach go tight. Someone had slipped magnetic overlays on a couple of them, turning one message into another. You could peel them off with gloves and slide them into a bag. Easy. God help you if you were a tourist in that soup. You'd turn where the sign told you and think the whole world just rotated. Little things started to itch. A tow truck kept arriving before us. The same operator, white Freightliner with a faded Longhorn decal on the passenger door. He rolled up to help confuse drivers into safer pullouts and had them sign digital forms, beaming helpfulness. He never took a vehicle, at least not with us watching, but twice. The owners later reported their SUV was stolen from the shoulder after they waited for help. OnStar log showed vehicle disabled for safety, then a sudden drop. The manufacturer rep politely told one victim her car had entered secure mode pending law enforcement request. We hadn't made any such request. I went to the wrecker yard where the Longhorn truck lived. Raul's Auto and Salvage squatted behind a coiled razor wire fence near a feed store. Raul himself had a soft handshake and a belligerent laugh. "Fog is good for business, trooper," he said, and then held up his hands like a priest. "Kidding, ma'am. Kidding." I stood by the muck-stained wheel wells and stared at my boots. "You got a board?" I asked. "Aero board, mobile, battery-powered?" He shrugged. "Rent them sometimes. For accident scenes. We follow the rules." Maybe they did. Maybe they didn't. The dispatcher on our end didn't help. Marta, who had a sweet voice when she wanted, clipped me off mid-sentence twice that night to patch and help calls that arrived conveniently late, as if someone were hearing us and scripting a response. By 3 a.m., I had a list. Pop-up aero boards no one bought. Overlays on wrong-way signs. Vanishing luxury SUVs. Help arriving early or rerouting drivers in a fog. I started thinking about all the places our radios stutter. There are dead zones on 83 where the curve of the earth and the metallic bones of packing sheds swallow you. If I were going to steal cars and jog them over the river in pieces, I'd want those zones. I'd want fog. I'd want drivers to put their vehicles exactly where I needed them. Lit angles under cover. I didn't say any of this out loud in the briefing room because I refused to be the person who sounds like a conspiracy theory with a badge. I filed what I could and went back out because that's what you do when your mouth is dry and the coffee has already been too much and the roads keep making more road. A little after 4, my phone buzzed. Not the MDT. My personal. Unknown number. Valley area code. I answered because my boundaries were tired. A man's voice, gentle, professional, with the calm cadence of a paramedic. "Trooper Walsh, this is Luis with vehicle assistance. We got a ping your unit's OnStar indicates abnormal airbag sensor readings. Are you seeing any warnings?" I stared at my dash. "Nothing." He went on. "We're rerouting to keep you out of a wrong-way cluster by Palmview. The fog's really bad down there." "Who requested the check?" I asked. "Dispatch," he said smoothly. "Marta Vega, right?" I didn't give him Martha's name. He gave it to me. Every hair on my neck rose, and I swallowed it down. "Copy," I lied. "What's the reroute?" He sent a link. A friendly blue line traced across my personal phone's map, zigging down a frontage road around a grove. The line took me off Main 83, through a gap in a windbreak, and toward a decommissioned packing shed I recognized. A long corrugated shadow with a busted logo still ghosting its side. The blue line stopped just short of it and suggested safe shoulder. He hung up before I could ask for credentials. I drove anyway. That's the hard part to explain to anyone who hasn't been out there at that hour. You drive because that's your job. You're the eye, the moving blue dot in everyone else's drama. Even when you know the script is being written by someone who shouldn't be holding the pen. The fog thickened. My GPS ping dropped once, then twice, the map lagging behind like a drunk. My Tahoe's stupid helpful suite of safety lights argued with itself and went quiet. When I hit the turnoff, a portable aero board glowed ahead, humming, its orange pixels reading wrong way with the biblical certainty of a highway sign. Someone had set it in the dirt angled toward a gap in the windbreak rose. Past it, another sign with reflective tape showed a cheerful U-turn icon. I slowed to a crawl and my headlights pushed nothing but white. A shadow broke the fog on my right. The white Freightliner wrecker, idling with lights off, Longhorn decal dark. The cab door opened and a silhouette lifted a hand, palm out, the universal hold gesture that cuts through even weather. Behind him, a softer shadow buzzed like a night insect. A drone, no more than a dark comma against milk, hovering at windshield height. I clicked my radio. Unit 4 to 12 on a possible wrong-way staging near mile marker. static ate the rest. The drone tilted toward me like a nod. I could have reversed. I could have called it, sat there, waited for other units to blunder into it with me. Instead, I slid forward, slow, stubborn. The gravel under my tires felt wet and sharp. I passed the arrow board, and my GPS died so cleanly that a square of emptiness took its place. When my front bumper crossed into the grove correct, I heard a sound like a zipper. Quick, mean. The Tahoe lurched. A spiked chain, half buried under brush and fog, bit both front tires. The steering wheel juddered hard in my hands, and then went slack like an animal that's decided to play dead. Momentum carried me 5 feet forward into an open bay, and a roll-up door came down behind me with a breathy warehouse sigh. Inside, the fog didn't scatter. It just joined the air, a ghost version of itself. The bay smelled like cutting oil and orange pith. An Escalade hung overhead with its belly open, innards gone, wiring cut into slick ribbons. A coffee can on a workbench glittered with VIN tags like fish scales. Telemetry modules, OnStar brains, GPS guts, lay in a tub like beach jellyfish. A generator coughed under a tarp. The door chain mechanism rattled into place behind me and locked. Easy, a voice murmured from the haze. Come, textbook. The paramedic voice. A man stepped forward in bunker pants and a dark hoodie. He held a CO2 extinguisher in both hands like a strange weapon. Another figure moved behind him. The tow operator, Raoul, face soft and composed, lifting a length of chain in a farmer's grip. CO2 powder slammed the bay in a blizzard. My world became white noise, absolute. An ice cave punched into the grove. I got the driver's door open with a shoulder and dropped out, half blind, lungs grabbing at cold, empty air that wasn't meant to be breathed. The paramedic was on me in 3 steps, saying, "Breathe slow, you'll be okay." The way you say it to someone bleeding, as if he were a comfort. He had a pry bar, a Halligan tool from some volunteer fire cache, and he brought it down toward my wrist where my radio sat. I took the blow on the meat of my forearm, and my hand went hot cold dead for a second. Cable ties flashed. He moved with a trainer's confidence, not a fighter's. I went for the gear shift to throw the Tahoe into drive, and discovered you can do a lot on bare rims if you are angry enough. The truck shuddered forward, metal screaming against concrete, and I swung the wheel into the paramedic's hips like a bat. He pitched sideways and caught himself on a lift column. The tow operator cursed in Spanish and grabbed at my door, and I jammed it closed on his wrist hard enough to feel bones slip. The extinguisher foam swirled, blinding, and the drone, a second one, buzzed inside the bay now, little cyclops eye pulsing. "Trooper," the paramedic said, voice smaller now. "Please, you're making this worse. We can stage you. We'll call it in. Stage me. Make me safe." Every inch of me prickled with rage. I shoved the Tahoe harder, pinning the paramedic against the column, and the bumper caught something metallic that shrieked and gave, the chain mechanism for the door. Sparks fattened the fog, gave it teeth. The wrecker revved outside, backing toward the door with the winch cable snaking under it, line spooling. The operator focused through the pain at the math of it. If he could hook my Tahoe and drag it sideways, I'd be offset and boxed. If he got me under the lift, he could take me apart like the Escalade. I bailed. The driver's side wasn't an option. The operator was there. I slid across the bench, kicked the passenger door, and got an inch. A gloved hand hit my ankle, and I stomped down and missed, and then hit again, and the fingers uncurled with a howl. I fell out into the powder and rolled, coming up bent and coughing, my eyes leaking chemical tears that didn't mean nothing except now I couldn't see and couldn't stop my chest from trying to climb out of itself. Chains clanked. The door shuddered up 2 inches, down 1, up 3, the damaged gear trying to work through pain. The wrecker's winch screamed like a pig at slaughter. The paramedic, Luis, I decided, even if that wasn't his name, dragged himself free of the lift column with a wet rattle in his breaths and pointed the extinguisher at my face again. I fired once, then twice. The first shot blew the extinguisher's handle off. The second caught the drone, which fell with the sad sound of a broken toy. "Stop!" he shouted, genuinely offended. "Stop, stop, stop." "No," I said, and surprised myself with how level it came out. A handheld crackled near the wrecker. Marta's voice. "Honeyed. Raoul, unit inbound to your location. 2 minutes. Stage and clear." They had her, or she had them. Or it didn't matter. The voice threaded the fog, and they had built an entire economy out of other people's blind spots. I put my whole weight into the door chain, metal groaning, and something snapped that shouldn't have. The door bucked up knee-high. Fog poured out of the bay into the night like breath. I bent, grabbed the bottom lip, and shoved with legs and back in a curse I learned from my father. It went up halfway, stuck, then jumped when the mechanism finally stripped. Outside, the grove was a world of ghost trees and wet black soil. The wrecker lurched and the side of the Tahoe jounced as the hook found purchase, the winch moaning, cable taut, a harp string you could play with a handgun. I slithered under the rising door and felt the jacket on my back snag. I ripped it and went flat in the mud. The tow operator left the winch and came after me with a chain swinging like a pendulum. He overcommitted the swing. I came up inside it and put an elbow into his chest, felt the soft thud of breath leaving, then brought the radio down hard on his collarbone. He folded around the pane with a ridiculous, almost theatrical gasp and stayed there, not out, but thinking about it. I staggered out of the bay, boots slipping, and found the spiked chain with my shins. It had dragged with the tires, curled near the threshold. I grabbed the nearest end and yanked it into the open like wedding train. When Raoul tried to chase, he hit it, lost his footing, and went down, the chain ringing the concrete in a snare drum rattle. "Jen," someone bellowed. Not Marta, not a voice on a stolen channel. Real. Unit sirens cut into the grove, their Doppler songs warped by fog, but honest. Blue blossomed on the low clouds. The wrecker's engine revved again, desperate, the winch line whining as it tore a piece of my Tahoe sideways. The paramedic limped into the doorway with the Halligan up, eyes fixed and glass bright, the way a craftsman looks when he knows the piece is salvageable with one more cut. I raised my pistol and held him there, sight wobbling from the micro tremors in my hands, a fact I registered with an absurd little hiccup of humiliation. He watched the front sight, the way shooters do. His expression flickered through a dozen small calculations. He spared one quick look at the coffee can of VIN tags on the bench, at the tub of stripped brains, at the arrow board outside like a rented altar. "We'll rebuild," he said plainly, like we deferred a shift, not dismantle the scheme. People always get lost in fog. The first unit slid into the grove mouth, tires whispering. The second took the parallel cut. Shouting replaced the night sounds. The shot I hadn't taken stayed in the empty space between us, a decision shaped like a hole. He lowered the Halligan, but not like surrender, like a notation in a margin. They cuffed him and the operator, and they swarmed the bay, and someone killed the generator. The fan spun down. The fog inside thinned, then steadied, and I emptied my lungs very slowly, because that was the only way to keep the edges of the world from glittering and tilting. Later, someone smarter than me explained how they'd done it. A dispatcher feeding them calls, a tow yard renting arrow boards and buying overlays on eBay, an EMT who could speak every language of reassurance, drones to judge targets by trim package and wheel size, GPS jammers and cookie tins, OnStar spoofing with leaked vendor logins. They'd built themselves a weather-dependent slaughter chute. They didn't break the rules of the road. They used them. I sat on the tailgate of a unit while a medic checked my pupils with a penlight, and I watched my breath make little clouds like I was the fog machine. The bay door hung crooked, a ridiculous smile. The Escalade's carcass dripped in a slow, expensive rhythm. Someone, God help me, a kid, held up the coffee can of VIN tags like evidence on a talk show, and I had to look away before I said something that would live in the record forever. Around dawn, the fog began to lift. It always does, eventually. You see tree leans resolve, and fence posts wear their halos away, and the road returns to grammar. We were still stringing crime scene tape when the sun stuck a tinfoil edge over the groves. I called my mother on the way back to the station because I wanted to hear someone who remembered my name when I was 4. She asked if it was one of those nights. I told her it was and said nothing else. A week later, the wrong way calls dropped to normal. The yard stayed shuttered, its chain link half dressed in yellow tape like a cheap dress. Marta took leave, family reasons, and our supervisor pretended he didn't read the same rumors I did about audits and terminations. Raoul's county attorney played the fog like a card, no clear line of sight, too much weather to prove intent. The EMT took a deal on federal equipment theft and the trafficking case, the one that mattered, stretched in a way that felt like taffy in a hot room. I still run 83. Winter has more to give. When the fog grows out of the ground now, I slow down a fraction past policy. I watch for arrow boards that aren't on anyone's inventory. I drive by the shuttered bay and count the bullet holes in the roll-up door where we tested our weapons later for report language I hated writing. At least once a shift, I meet my own eyes in the mirror and check that I can still tell the difference between the calm of a rescuer and the calm of a thief. The voices on the radio blur sometimes. The good ones and the purchased ones share a tone when they tell you to breathe. Sometimes I catch the scent of grapefruit in the air, and for half a second I see the wrong way sign glow out of the white, and my stomach drops like the floor of an elevator. A mile later, the fog thins and it's just a sign again, red and patient, holding the grammar of the world. I keep a roll of gaffer's tape in my cruiser now. I don't know what that says about me, except that if I ever catch a magnetic overlay in my hand again in that soup, I won't be the one who loses direction. I used to love the fog. It felt like the valley hours alone for a few hours, dulled and quieted and made humble. Now when it arrives, it feels like an invitation written in a hand I recognize too well. This way, this way, this way. And even knowing the trick, even hearing the rules inside me like a catechism, I can feel how easy it would be to obey. They call Highway 137 the line nobody draws. A chalk stroke through scrub and caliche that locals use for groceries, and oil crews use for work, and troopers use when we need to remember what silence sounds like. It runs from Stanton south, through glass-flat ranchland and pump jacks that nod like tired men. On nights when there's no wind, you can hear your tires in the gravel when you drift an inch. On nights with wind, the mesquite whispers like someone trying not to cough. I was cruising the south stretch past Stiles, the part where the Tulane makes long, honest miles and the shoulder breaks down into chalk dust. It was a Tuesday and my log was ordinary in the way that makes you careless. 1 warning for a tail light, 2 assists for flats, a rancher who wanted to talk border politics to my badge like I carried a ballot box in the trunk. I'm Daniel McKenzie. I was 32 when I disappeared. I tell you that so you don't make me older or younger than I am in your head. People do that when they hear vanished trooper. They want it to fit their story. My body cam had started giving me a static hiss on certain miles. A wiring harness issue the text said they'd get to Friday. Dispatch knew. I checked in more often, the way you do when your tools make you feel naked. The radio coverage out there has holes, and you learn where they are. I still talk through them anyway. Unit 3 to 19 on 137, Mall 46, nothing to report. The night yawned in return. Past midnight, I saw hazard strobes stuttering in the dark, low and tired like someone's emergency battery was done being brave. A white F-250 sat half off the shoulder with its hood up. The driver's door was open. No cones, no flares, no reflective triangle. Just those little squares of light tapping the night. The wind whipped a torn blue tarp under the truck like a dog worrying a toy. You get twitchy when the scene doesn't have the shape you expect. The details start to lift up in your vision like you've rubbed your eyes. I rolled in slow, angled my cruiser for cover, lights low to keep from blinding whoever was out there. Evening. I called, and heard how the word fell and didn't come back. Trooper McKenzie, you all right? I swept the maglite beam across the interior. Empty bench, 2 energy drink cans in the cup holder, an oil-field hard hat on the floorboard, a clipboard with a manifest tucked under the visor. Nothing looked wrong and nothing looked right. I didn't step inside the V of my headlights. I stayed quartered off the bumper like I was taught. The beams made a pale triangle, and the wind picked up dust that made the light visible, a sliced cone of chalk and gnats. A man stepped from the black farther down the shoulder, behind the truck, not from the cab door where a normal person would be. He wore a high-vis vest over a hooded sweatshirt, a ball cap under the hood like he couldn't decide which world he was working in. Hands out, palms empty. He walked with that careful speed people have when they don't want to spook you, like approaching a skittish horse. Sir, I called. Stay where you are. He stopped. Yes, trooper. The voice was smooth and clipped. I couldn't place the age. He pointed back the way he came. Stalled out. I put out a triangle, but wind blew it. License. I said out of habit, and the moment felt too normal, like we'd jumped into a parallel scene where I wasn't already uneasy. He reached for a pocket and I saw the vest logo. A worn green patch the shape of a shield with the words scruffed out. Just as my radio burped into static. Not the usual canyon static. A mechanical, purposeful buzz that ate the channel like it had been hungry. He froze with his hand half in his pocket. "You going to fix your radio, or are you going to help me?" he asked, light, almost playful. His right hand opened empty. His left hand, in his pocket, tightened, and I realized both of us were looking at my shoulder mic like it was a goldfish we were hoping would start to breathe. I reached to tap it, stupidly, and that's when the truck's bed cover popped up like a lid and someone inside it, in the bed of the truck, pulled a black plastic roll toward me. It wasn't right how fast it came. The roll was netting, weighted around the edges, the kind game wardens use on deer, the kind fishermen sleep with in their hands. I got a half turn, got my arm up, and the net hit hard enough to knock my hat. We went down in chalk. The first man moved smooth, not like a panicked thief. He moved like he had practiced. A boot pinned my forearm. The net's weights found my calves and cinched like snakes. I got my right hand free enough to grab for my holster, and he laughed, not mean. "No, sir," he said, and his voice stayed calm through the whole sentence like he was teaching a class. A second pair of hands, clean, gloved, the nitrile kind medics use, found my wrist. Something cold and plastic bit over my fingers. A zip tie came around and kissed the grip of my gun and my hand at the same time, locking my fingers open around nothing. I tried to turn my head, and the first man caught my jaw in his palm. He didn't hit me. He held me still and looked at me the way EMS looks at patients. He had the kind of eyes that keep notes. "Breathe easy, Danny," he said. And when he used my name, I felt a stacking of minutes behind us that I hadn't lived. He tapped my shoulder mic, and it made that noise again, the one that didn't belong to terrain or weather. "Comms are jammed. They'll think you drifted into a dead spot. That buys us 90 seconds. The second man, the one with the medic's gloves, leaned close enough that my cheek brushed his jacket zipper. "Do you consent to care?" he murmured, a dark joke that told me he used to ask that when it mattered. He slid a fabric bag over my head. Not a plastic bag, not a panic maker, just a thick hood that took the world away like a room light turning off. The smell was clean cotton and dust. My breath bounced back at me, and I heard it, human and shallow. For a second, a very small, foolish part of me thought, "We're still on the shoulder. Someone will stop. They'll see the lights." Then my own light bar clicked off. The night went so black that my body believed in it. They rolled me. The net went from heavy to heavier, and then weightless. I heard a hinge and a dull slam. Truck bed. The cover dropped. A gloved finger found the corner of my mouth and peeled the hood up a sliver to slide a mouth guard against my molars. "For your teeth," the medic said gently. "You'll clench." They didn't hit me. The truck rolled, gravel like rain. My cruiser's engine hummed somewhere too far away. I kicked once, and the net gave me nothing but its own shape. We rode with no radio, no music, no conversation. When the truck turned, the weights bit my shin, and I took that bright, hard pain as evidence I was still Daniel and not a shape. If I could tell you how long we drove, I would. It felt like forever. It was 20 minutes. The hood make time a lie. So does fear. We turned off the highway at some point. I know because the sound changed from asphalt to washboard dirt to something like broken concrete. The truck stopped. The tailgate clanged open and hands. 3 pairs now. All steady. All with that quiet professionalism. Found me and lifted. They didn't drag. They saved their backs, used my belt as a handle. We moved into air that smelled like old wood and ammonia. Dust and mice. I tracked smell like it was a map. Mineral, bleach, stale oil, wet earth, cedar. A door side open. I heard my net scratch a floor. Someone flipped a switch and a fan licked the hood against my mouth. They cut the ties, not the net. They rolled me out like a fish from a seine. The hood came off. Bright fluorescent light was a fist. I closed my eyes, and the world painted itself on my lids in inverse colors. When I opened, the room didn't make sense for a second, and then it did. It was a garage built under something else. House, barn. Cement floor, a drain, workbench with coffee cans of screws, and a vise as old as a father. Rafter ends under a plywood ceiling sprayed with foam insulation. A bulletin board with maps pinned by knife tips. Strings crossing like a spider got methodical. A radio scanner on a shelf, duct-taped antenna, Numeric display bright with a set of frequencies I recognized. County, DPS interop, Border Patrol TAC. He stood by the bench and watched me with a soft, interested expression. He was maybe late 40s, the kind of fit that doesn't sell itself. Short hair, sun-browned. His hands were clean and his boots were military. He carried no gun I could see. He wore a U.S. Border Patrol field jacket with the patches picked off. The outline still showed like scars. He saw me look and gave a small nod like I'd answered a quiz. "Every uniform leaves a shadow when you strip it," he said. "Even when you take the cloth away." "You a cop?" I asked. My voice sounded wrong in the bright. There was a bite mark in it from the mouthguard. "Used to be. We're between labels." He pointed at a stool, and at the same time, something in my wrist tugged. I hadn't seen the zip ties, just felt their consequence. He moved behind me with a little half-bow of apology to nudge me toward the stool with 2 fingers at my elbow. Polite. Polite as hell. "Marcus Thompson," he said conversationally. "Sector for 9 years. Then I learned the difference between a job and a promise." The name landed with a weight that made sense later when the task force said it in a room with the air conditioning turned too high. Right then, it was just syllables attached to the face of a man who knew exactly how long it took to jam a radio network. He didn't break me. Let's get that out. He tried to. He built a place for it. He'd thought about the shape of breaking like we think about how to keep people from dying on hot asphalt. He wanted me to walk myself there. He flicked the scanner's volume up and let a thread of my own world seep into the room. Dispatch tones. A traffic stop 30 miles north. The board weather update that makes you sure no one's ever going to say your name in a way that matters again. He switched the channel and a recorded loop began. It was my voice. From body cam footage. The little pieces we repeat all night without thinking. License and registration. "Where you headed? You have anything in the vehicle I should know about?" Hearing myself stripped of context made me feel like a code hanging on a nail. He watched my face change and nodded, pleased like a teacher whose student just got the trick. "You'll be alone until your people realize how the dead spots stack tonight," he said. "That buys us dawn." "What do you want?" I asked. I'd meant it to land hard. It came out like a student slipping the answer into the silence to see if it would pass. He didn't answer. He gestured to the bulletin board. The strings made a shape I knew even if I couldn't name it. lat/longs along 137. Dates in Sharpie. Tiny printed photos of stops the papers had run when some idiot with a camera catches a trooper in the background. 4 red dots glowed on the wall under the bench like small wounded eyes. The lights weren't eyes. They were the ends of fishing lines strung across the floor at shin height. Tripwires with little photoresistors taped into homemade circuits connected to. I followed the wire with my eyes. To what looked like flares, yes, but with blanks of something else duct taped on them. Tannerite. Propane? No, simpler. 12-gauge shells fitted into pipe nipples with nails fixed as firing pins. Improvised pop-ups. Not big bombs. Deterrents. He'd read manuals, and he'd built something he could take apart before he needed to explain it to a jury that would never see his face. "I want to know if your oath is a thing you put on in the morning," he said, as if we were still on the same subject. "Or if you kept it when your department started sorting people into friendlies and enemies based on the way the wind was that month." "You hunt troopers," I said. He smiled without showing teeth, and I realized he wanted me to say his slogan back to him, wanted me to help him fill the room with his own mythology. He moved sudden, and I flinched. He only reached past me to the bench and turned on a fluorescent with a bad ballast. It hummed like bees. He opened a drawer and took out a laminated card. He laid it on my knee like a doctor leaving a pamphlet. It was a copy of the DPS Code of Ethics. If you've worn a badge, you know it by the rhythm, if not by the words. The phrases are built like stair steps. Honesty, courage, compassion. He tapped the line about protect and serve without prejudice. He tapped the words equal enforcement of the law. He tapped I will never betray, and didn't tap the noun. I breathed. I counted my breaths like a poor man counts bills. "Marcus," I said, borrowing his first name the way he'd borrowed mine, making a bridge I didn't want. "I don't know what you think you're doing, but—" "I'm correcting the record," he said. His tone hardened like a plane of glass cooling. I watched my sector be told to stand down. I watched paper chiefs smile and call it policy when they meant politics. I watched troopers put babies in car seats and turn a blind eye when their bosses wanted them to, then write tickets like heroes when it made a talking head feel tall. He leaned in. His eyes were not wild. That was the part that scared me. They were tired and clear. I enforce. That string on the wall. He pointed at the map. Those are the men who still wear the oath on their skin. Some of them I tested. Some of them failed. He made the fail sound like a C on a quiz. He kept me in that room until morning, and then he moved me. He never hit me. He fed me water like a medic. 2 gulps. Rest. 2 gulps. He adjusted the hood so it didn't chafe. He tightened the ties, and then checked my fingers for color like he wanted me alive for the test. He played my voice back and asked me to repeat it into a cheap recorder. Say it again, he said, and I did, and the cumulative nausea of hearing yourself not be yourself made me want to vomit. He'd cut audio from my stops to make me narrate a new scene where the words were mine, but the choices weren't. Psychological torture is a phrase that sounds like a pillow. It's drywall dust and a clock that stops and the knowledge that no matter how you raise your voice, the room will keep the same temperature. The second room had a cot and a drain and a window that didn't open. The light was always gently wrong. He brought in a radio and tuned it to the weather station so the voice would tell me the same wind speed every 15 minutes like a minister with only one sermon. He taped a paper to the wall with a list of names. Troopers. For had red pencil through them. I looked for my own without meaning to. My eye found Mackenzie before my mind did. He'd drawn a line through the second half of the word, leaving MCK. I looked at him. Not yet, he said, like a promise. He had help. The medic was a former EMT with hands like instructions. He checked my pupils with a penlight. He palpated my ribs to see if the panic had cracked anything when I threw myself against the net. He gave me ibuprofen from a bottle with the label peeled. He told me to breathe, and I wanted to break every finger he laid on me. I couldn't make myself hate him the way I wanted. The professional reflex to care made him human when I needed him to be a shape. He had a third man for errands, and for the part none of them wanted to own. The humiliation. The piss bucket, the short leash on the cot, the way he cut my belt and laced my pants back on loosely, like I couldn't be trusted with my own waistband. That man smiled too much. His eyes were eager. I learned the empty of his brain in the way he parroted Marcus's lines with zeal that didn't fit his mouth. Marcus asked me to recite the code of ethics. He asked me to say which part mattered more when the day got ugly, protect or serve. He asked me if I knew the names of the men whose funerals I'd saluted at. He turned the scanner up and let me hear the first hour of my own search. My unit number on repeat, the way my sergeant's voice lost its comfort and became shaped like a blade. I tried not to tilt toward the sound. He saw the tilt. He smiled sad. They'll find the cruiser at mile 48. Motor running. Lights on. You know that's what makes them angry. The motor. Wastes taxpayer gas. It was such a small detail that for a second I thought I'd hallucinated the humor in it. And then I saw he wasn't joking at all. There's a thing your brain does when you're the subject of a search. It leaves your body. Parts of me were out there with the units, hanging just above the hoods, seeing the ditch I couldn't see from the hood, looking at the mesquite for the break. Parts of me were in the helicopter that would go up when the sun allowed it, looking down with a god's eye that still somehow misses a man on the ground if he knows to lie under trash. Parts of me rode in the truck with my wife when they called her and told her not to drive, not to come. That coming would not help. I didn't know they had called yet. I still felt the steering wheel in my hands. That's what the mind does to not drown in a room that insists you are a lesson instead of a person. I don't know when I started to answer him like we were having a conversation. Sleep and non-sleep blur. Time becomes soup you can't chew. He was smart enough to ask human questions in between the slogans. Where are you from? You got kids. How old were you when you first wore a uniform? And then he slid the knife under the skin. When did it stop being about the border and start being about the badge? He wanted me to say never, and he wanted to hear me be wrong. Every few hours he would leave, and the eager one would take his place and play the loop of my voice, and then play a different loop. It took me a minute to understand the second one was me too, the ancient noise of my own sleeping breath through the body cam mic when I'd catnapped at a staging area after a hurricane. Hearing yourself asleep is like seeing your body from outside. It lands wrong in the animal brain. He alternated them, awake Daniel, asleep Daniel, like a kind of tide. When the rescue came, it was not cinematic. That belongs to the movies. It came as an argument in the hallway and whispers that went sharp. It came as the medic saying, you cannot, the switch is, and the eager man saying, I know, and then footfalls. The overhead light clicked off. The small battery light over the door flickered and held. The room changed shape in the way lit rooms do, corners coming closer. My heart started to drum in my throat and my wrists throbbed in time. Something outside creaked that wasn't a human voice. It was the tick of a thermal camera mount as it changed angle. I didn't know it then. I know it now. A hand came through the door. It wasn't gloved. It found the chain on my ankle and tugged once in a way that said, look at me. The face that followed belonged to the eager man, eyebrows up in excited threat. He started to say something rehearsed, on your feet, just as another sound arrived and erased the distance between all sounds. A loud, succinct crack from outside. Not a full bang, but a suppressed one, a punctuation in the argument. The eager man flinched and then did the worst possible thing. He lunged without a plan. He caught the chain in his own legs and fell and hit the tripwire I had cataloged without inventorying, the fishing line at shin height. The photoresistor saw daylight when his body blocked the battery light. One of the pipe devices spit, not a giant Hollywood fireball, a violent cough. A shower of sparks licked the door. He screamed and made it sound bigger than it was. The hallway roared alive. State police, a voice on the right side of the universe shouted, and I knew then, not just in the part of me that lived above the hoods, that we had found each other again. It gets messy. Men who know how to set the board also know how to flip it and run. Marcus had a run plan. The medic tried to cut me loose when he realized the math had changed. His hands were fast under stress too. He kept saying hold still, like I was the one shaking. The hallway filled with boot noise and commands, both sides barred by fear from hearing, until you can feel the words swimming into each other like fish in too small a pond. My chain came free, and I gave him my wrists, and he cut the ties and put his palms on my shoulders to steady me as if we had any reason to trust each other's touch. Marcus didn't come in shooting. He came in with his hands raised to shoulder height, fingers spread, not surrender, not surrender. He looked at me like we were finishing a conversation and then shifted that look to the sergeant in the doorway with the rifle. He measured the distance to the tripwires and stepped over them like a man who built his own house. Careful, he said to my sergeant, and to his credit, my sergeant listened. Pride falls fast when you smell powder. They didn't kill him. They took him. He said his name in a calm voice to the arresting trooper like a man introducing himself at a church social. He kept his eyes on me, as if the ritual only counted if I watched, and I watched because I couldn't not. They took the eager one too, still cussing through tears. The medic walked out under his own power, hands high, and when he passed me he dipped his head once like a man leaving a hospital room. He said, breathe, and I almost laughed hard enough to vomit. They found the truck. They found the jammer, a cheap box with a battery and stubby antennas tuned to walk all over our chatter. They found my zip tie on the holster grip. They found the map with the strings and the names and the careful dates. They found the field jacket with the shadows of its old patches. They took pictures of the improvised devices, and someone said, booby traps, and I wanted to close my eyes until words went back to being tools. They handed me water in a little paper cone like a kid at track day, and I held it with both hands because I didn't trust one to do anything alone. Alive is a word that feels like a poem when you hear it under fluorescent lights. Reporters will use it, and it will make their pieces feel merciful and right. It isn't a right word. It's a technical one. I was alive. I was not okay. I could tell you the model of the scanner by sound, but I couldn't tell you if my own house had a back porch. I could recite the code of ethics without flinching, but I couldn't read my name on a form without thinking of the partial MCK on his wall. They asked me for details for 12 hours. That is not a complaint. That is a necessary harm. Trauma makes detail slippery. I gave them consent to harm me a little more in the name of catching every shadow of what he'd built. I told them the smell of ammonia and the chain on the roll-up door and the way the wind moved wrong in the garage because the house above had a hole cut in the floor for the time he'd needed to lower something heavy. They nodded like priests. They asked me to identify voices on tapes. They said his full name to me like a call-in response until the syllables stopped being a person and became a set of charges. At home, my wife made our bedroom into a small, bright bunker for a while. The dog I'd trained not to jump on the bed ignored his training and put his head on my chest and listened to me breathe like it was his job. The first week, I couldn't sleep unless the weather radio was on in the kitchen. The identical quarter-hour forecasts were my proof that time had resumed its shape. If the voice said wind south 10, then I was here, and I could find my way to the kitchen in the dark without counting steps. For a long time, I measured everything by distance from that garage. I stopped on 137 sometimes, late, engine idling. Not because I wanted to tempt old patterns, but because I needed to see the shoulder and remind it that it didn't own me. People ask what he wanted. They want his motive to be an object they can set on a shelf and dust. He wanted to punish us for being wrong in a way he was right about. That's the ugly truth. Men like him are most dangerous when they aren't entirely wrong. He saw the ways policy becomes theater. He refused theater. He wrote his own script and decided we had to say his lines. My oath didn't change shape in that room. That sounds like bragging. It isn't. It's just that an oath is something you make to a version of yourself that will be in rooms you can't imagine yet. If it can be changed by a man with a scanner and a sad voice, it probably wasn't the thing you thought it was. I went back to work after the doctors and the shrinks signed their paperwork, and I said the right things and meant them as much as any man can mean them when he is still counting breaths at night. Highway 137 still runs where it runs. The pump jacks still nod. I still talk to dispatch in the dead spots even when the radio doesn't answer. I stop for hazard lights because if I don't, I'm not me. I don't think he broke my spirit. I don't think that was his test to pass. He left a shape in my days, the way an old picture leaves a light rectangle on a wall when you take it down. Sometimes when I reach for the mic, my hand hesitates half a second because my skin remembers nitrile fingers where my fingers should have been. In that half second, I take a breath and say my unit number and the mile marker and whatever else comes out, and the wind does whatever it's going to do to the mesquite, and the road receives us both without prejudice. And that, finally, is the only answer I know how to give to a man who thought he could make me recite his lines. They teach you not to stand in the V of your headlights. You angle the cruiser, you control the space, you talk with your hands visible and your voice low. You mark the shoulder, you mark the driver, you mark the way the wind carries sound. On Farm to Market 942, the pines drink the light so fast your beams feel like they're sinking. It was 1:17 when I lit up the blue Tahoe ahead of me for drifting and a dead tail light. Routine. East Texas routine smells like sap and diesel in a wet ditch. I'm Trooper Michael Santos, District 2. My body cam chirped green. Dispatch was bored enough to sound kind. Unit 2 to 11, 10 to 38, FM 942 at mile 18, blue Chevy Tahoe, Texas plate. Copy, I said, and stepped out into the hum of crickets. The driver was a woman in her late 20s, hair in a messy bun, hands at 10 and 2 like she'd been to one of those classes they make you take after a ticket. I took position, explained the stop, took her license, Marisol Ortega, Lufkin, and noticed the oddest thing. A new wrong way sticker barely peeling on the inside of her windshield. Not a TxDOT sticker. A private safety decal with a star, the kind kids buy at flea markets. Nothing, but my neck hair clocked it. Back at my unit, my MDT froze. Not just lag, pinned. Then my radio coughed into a high, insectal buzz, and went dead. I'm used to dead spots. The big thicket has more holes than Swiss. This wasn't terrain. This was a hand over my mouth. I looked up to wave to Marisol, to give her the universal 1 SEC gesture, and she stared past me like I wasn't there. Headlights glowed in my side mirror, low and urgent. A light bar flicked a quick courtesy chirp, 2 tones, counterfeit crisp. A black and white Charger ghosted up behind my unit, nose tucked like it belonged there. My chest did a quick, stupid loosen, back up, even as my brain said, "You didn't call any." A voice hit the night from a PA, close and authoritative, and for a heartbeat I thought it was my own. "Driver, step forward to the lead unit. Trooper needs to reposition for safety. Keep your hands visible." I couldn't hear the PA directly, not over the buzz climbing my radio. That's the part that still wakes me up. I saw Marisol nod to someone behind me I couldn't clearly see, and I couldn't hear the instruction she heard. She cracked her door. "Ma'am." I called, but the word died inches from my head. She stepped out, clutching her purse like a talisman, and walked forward into the darkness past my push bumper. The backup car flared its alley light, blinding, and for a half-second the silhouette in the driver's seat looked like every trooper silhouette in the state. I stepped to intercept. My radio screamed and popped. My body cam power cycled itself, blinked, beeped. When my eyes cleared, the Charger ahead had already turned its nose out and slid away without a siren, flowing back into the Tulane like a fish into a stream. My brain tried to resolve what I'd seen. Black and white, visor light, star on the door that wasn't the right star. By the time I reached where Marisol had been, the spot was empty and my own flashlight beam found nothing but gnats. Her Tahoe still idled. Driver's door open. Purse gone. I ran the grass along the shoulder like a dog. No footprints that weren't mine. No drag marks. No nothing. My cruiser's dash cam showed a perfect textbook stop until the moment the Charger's lights bloomed and the feed fractured into stuttering geometry. We found the first frame afterward, still and burn-marked in the export. My unit, my hat brim, and beyond me a door with a star that was wrong by 4 points in a font that was legally not a font. In the report I wrote, abducted. I wrote it like a man carving into a table. I knew the weight the word carried. I knew they'd pull my last 4 traffic stops and count my mistakes backward until they found a number that calmed them down. 2 nights later, a woman vanished on 287 the same way. 2 weeks after that, one on US 79. Different counties. Same malfunction pattern. MDT pins, radio scream, dashcam glitch, shadow cruiser arriving with perfect timing and helpful posture, victim obediently walking to authority. We built a task force because that's what we do when the map goes from dots to a shape. Organized crime, highway patrol, rangers, county. Someone from TDCJ came and gave us a lecture about imposters and prison chasers who buy surplus light bars on Craigslist. We nodded because none of that was news. The part that was new was the silence he could put inside our cars like he owned them. The LPR log showed the fake cruiser sometimes, or something like it. A black Charger with a mismatched bumper and a plate that rotated like a craps wheel. The timestamps on the jams tracked with a homemade repeater ID flashing on our network. NAC Substation East. We don't have a Nacogdoches substation east of town. We have a decommissioned DPS office that used to be a converted feed store, and it's been shuttered 5 years, the sign sun-bleached to a white rectangle and the flagpole crooked. I drove there at noon with a ranger named Ortega who kept a journal in his pocket and didn't smile. The parking lot had quicklime spread in a half moon like someone meant to erase a stain. In the back, the bay doors had new padlocks. The front door wore a fresh cheap keypad lock, wired sloppy. Ortega cupped his hands against the glass, peered in, and grunted. Painted the lobby. Who paints an empty lobby? Inside, once we got the warrant and came back with tools, smelled like ammonia and pine sol, and the way a motel smells when someone was trying too hard after something went wrong. The front desk had a bell and a laminated sign that read Citizen Accountability Center in a font that made my molars hurt. A rack held pamphlets, orders of the court, public compliance, Texas safety orientation. None of them were from any government printer I know. They were clean, crisp, and a hair off. Like an uncanny valley of bureaucracy. Beyond the lobby, the substation had been rearranged into a ritual maze. Tape squares on the floor like footprints in a dance studio. Stripes on walls at shoulder height for posture checks. Rooms labeled with label maker tape. Intake, RE training, debrief. In intake, a folding table with a camera on a tripod and a little backpack portable jammer, humming faint, like a mosquito. In RE training, a podium that might have been stolen from a school board and a whiteboard with phrases erased hard enough to ghost. Say it back. Acknowledge authority. Failure is disrespect. There were no victims when we walked in. I wanted to gut the place anyway. We found evidence that it had been alive hours before. A styrofoam cup with a lipstick smear, a strip of Velcro ripped off in anger, for identical navy blue polos with CAC embroidered at the breast and name tapes. Pike, Sloan, Jameson, and a blank. We lifted prints and got a hit in an hour for one of the names. Randall Pike, 47, former corrections, fired for programmatic overreach, which is a phrase HR writes when the truth is uglier. We swept the rest of the building with the quiet, careful speed of men who've learned to look for wires. The back bay was the throat of it, a renovated garage with 2 roll-up doors and a wall-mounted TV looping a video. We stood there with our arms crossed and watched our own jobs be badly impersonated. The video wore the trappings of an officer safety film. Seal, music, narration, but the seal was a circle without an eagle and the tune was off the shelf. The narrator's voice had the warm syrup of a small-town preacher. Welcome to the center. You are not under arrest. You are under correction. You have endangered Texas with your choices. We are here to protect you from your mistakes. We shut it off. The silence came down like a lid. 3 days passed. We set marked units on every shoulder with a camera pointed at every angle we could afford to watch at once. We rotated patterns. We called the FBI because radio jamming crosses lines. We sent a letter to the companies that make those fake light bars they aren't supposed to sell. We did cop things in cop order. The next woman vanished on a county road we weren't watching because our manpower isn't infinite, and the person we were hunting understood that our intervals aren't wall-to-wall. I stopped sleeping right. I spent hours with an RF scout in my lap, windows down, sniffing for the buzz. It's the kind of instrument you can't stare at too long without beginning to see intelligence in noise. I found him by accident on a Tuesday evening in a gospel station's dead air, 2 blocks off the old substation, sitting in his fake Charger at a washateria like a regular guy killing time. He watched the door. He had that posture, the easy, coiled ease of someone who expects everyone to move when he points. He wore our tan, perfectly wrong. I didn't stop. I drove past and circled 2 blocks and texted Ortega. He's here. The reply came fast. Wait. But waiting is a thing you do when you don't remember the way her feet looked when she stepped forward into my lights. I parked a block over and went on foot. He saw me when I was 20 yards out and smiled like a coworker. He raised 2 fingers from the wheel in a casual salute and flicked on his alley light in a tiny hello. I saw the door logo and my brain screamed even while my body stepped closer. A star with 8 points instead of 5, state pulse, with the eye missing, the kind of miss a printer makes when you promise not to look hard. He touched the brim of a hat he wasn't wearing. The alley light washed me. Behind it, I made out the different grille and the wrong push bumper and the way the light bar sat a little too tall. Evening, trooper, he said, conversational, as if we had already had several evenings in a row together. The name tape on his polo red pike. He didn't bother with a shield. His jaw had a tiny notch scar like a paper cut. Up close, he was unremarkable in the way that lets monsters move. You could cast him as a deacon or a drywall guy, and nobody would remember his face. I did not tell him my name, and he used it anyway. Santos, you were quick on Ortega, Marisol. He watched my eyes. That one's still on my conscience. She was Easter egg easy, and I assumed you'd be slower. That's on me. I corrected the schedule. I took a step toward the pillar between us to put concrete where he couldn't. My pistol sat heavy on my hip. In every scenario they teach you, if a man in a fake uniform says your name before you offer it, you end the conversation. He had his left hand on the wheel. His right hand rested on the blank slate of his thigh. The alley light clicked brighter, and my RF scout, in my pocket, buzzed. I could put you on the ground and cuff you. Randall, I said, aiming at normal. But I know you'd like the theater. You'd like the headline. So here's my offer. You walk into that washateria with me now. We sit on a bench, and we call the ranger, and you talk before you lose your nerve. He looked genuinely wounded. Lose my nerve? I'm the only one in this county telling anybody the truth. He gestured toward the washateria window. A woman inside folded blue jeans into a neat stack and bounced her baby in a basket beside the machines. He dropped his voice without lowering its certainty. The world you make doesn't deserve the authority you wear. I'm making citizens safe by training them to obey the first time. Compliance saves lives. You kidnap women, I said. He nodded once, infuriatingly logical. People obey hardest when their illusions are fresh. He glanced at the mirror. Shift change, Santos. You going to draw on me in front of that baby? You'll bruise the baby's mother forever. You don't want to do that. Then he clicked something I never found in his car later, and my radio exploded into bees and my body cam did its little sad blink and my instincts said move. He didn't reach for a gun. He reached for his visor, flipped it down, and 2 little puck jammers stuck there flashed a LED wink. I closed the distance because distance is where men like him live. At 10 feet, he kicked his door open like a mule and let it catch my shin. I went down in the wash of his alley, bone pain ringing, and when I rolled, he was already out and closing, hands empty, posture of a hands-on trainer. He moved like he lived in training videos, disarming men with stories. He said, "Easy," like we shared something. Then he drove a palm into my chest with the perfect, infuriating heel he learned in a prison gym, and I hit the asphalt and tasted iron. He didn't run. He walked to my front bumper and spoke into his shoulder like an officer with a radio. Unit 8 to 13 en route. Re-education candidate combative. He made his voice calm enough that if you didn't know the frequency was fake, your bones would listen. I put my hand on my pistol, and as I flicked to it, not with fear, but with delight, like I'd hit my mark in his scene. Then Ortega's unmarked came around the corner, so hard his tires sang. Pike's face did the smallest arithmetic, and he smiled at me like he'd enjoyed our first date and couldn't wait for the second. He faded between cars and into an alley as if he'd been there his whole life. We chased and chased air. They raided the center that night. It was empty again, but warm. The bay TV was gone. The portable jammer had a fresh battery. In debrief, we found a whiteboard with a new line not erased hard enough. Santos, Resh Stage 2. I slept in my uniform the next night because I knew in my ribs he wasn't done with me. My phone vibrated near midnight. Unknown number. I let it go. It called again. I answered and held the breath he wanted me to hold. A woman's voice, monotone, steady. "This is Officer Sloan with the NAC substation. Your presence is requested for debrief on the Ortega contact." "My ranger is named Ortega," I said, and I swear I heard her blink. "Officer of interest," she corrected, as if she were reading from a script and the line had shifted under her finger. "We need you present to maintain your authority status." The phrase authority status made my skin try to climb off. "Where?" She told me, polite. "The old substation," as if it were a real place. The tone meant she had no idea we'd already been inside, or she knew and didn't care. I didn't go alone. We are not cowboys, however much the public wants us to be. Ortega set units 2 blocks away and put a UAV up to watch the roof. I walked in with my hat in my hand and my hands where the cameras could see them. The keypad beeped like a cash register. The lobby smelled like panic cleaner again. The pamphlet rack had new, freshly printed lies. A man at the desk stood when I entered. Not Pike. Skinny, buzzed hair, 25 maybe. The blue cack polo hung off him like a thrift store find. He looked relieved to see me. "Trooper Santos," he said, struggling to make it sound official. He gestured to the tape marks on the floor. "Stand on the line. Feet on the prints." "No," I said. He blinked. "Sir." "No," I repeated, calm. I walked past the prints and into the bay. If there was a trap, it needed a spring. That is a bad sentence to write about your own life. But if I hovered outside it forever, more women would step into marks on the floor and say, "Sir," when the man who deserved it wasn't in the room. Pike stepped out of the shadows behind the roll-up door, hands clasped like a pastor. The bay had been set for a show. The TV was back. The podium waited. A strip of painter's tape ran down the center like a spine. On a table, a red LED timer counted in descending seconds. He had staged me like a student in his class. "Welcome, Santos," he said warmly. "Say it back." "Not your student," I said. He nodded, indulgent. "We'll do this the other way, then." The door slammed behind me. The kid at the desk yanked a chain. The roll-up bellowed down. The jammer somewhere in the ceiling sang. My radio went underwater. The TV sprang to life, showing my face from a traffic stop months ago, a frame freeze just wrong enough to dehumanize. "You are safe," my captured voice said. "You are under correction. You will obey." He didn't come at me with fists. He came with ritual. He stepped close, placed 2 fingers on my shoulder epaulette like a father correcting a tie. "Stand on the line," he said, voice low. "No." He smiled. "Good. A spine. That will make the lesson take." He signaled, and the kid hit a switch. Strobe lights bit the ceiling on a metronome beat, and a narrowband siren switched on. A pain you feel deep behind the eyes because your bones are a wireless network. He had built a compliance lab out of a car bay. The indoctrination was simple and cruel. Flood the senses, control the words, force the body to find relief in obeying small instructions. He told me to touch the wall. He told me to say yes, sir. He told me to place my hands behind my head and interlace my fingers. Each time I said no, he added something, sound, Light, a strip heater warming the room, a bit of capsaicin under the air vent that made the back of the throat itch like pepper spray. The timer ticked down, and he made a show of not looking at it. "You think I'm just a madman with props," he said over the siren. "Perfectly easy. I'm a man who has watched our institutions rot into apology. I teach obedience. I peel away the lies until they surrender to the first voice that isn't theirs. You would be amazed how quick it goes when you take the choice away." My eyes watered. The siren pulsed in a pattern designed to steal. The kid at the desk watched with his mouth open, a little light behind his eyes like a new convert. I would have loved to put him through a wall. I kept my hands free because in every scenario where you lose them, you lose everything. "Marisol," I said into the noise. It cut him. It did. He flinched like I had tapped a nerve. "Where is she?" He nodded to the kid. The kid disappeared into debrief and returned with a file folder like a waiter with a drink. Pike held it up, sympathetic. "She's not here," he said. "We are not collectors. We are instructors. We reshaped her, and she rejoined the world better." "Rejoin like a part," I said. He sighed. "If you keep breaking my sentences, I'll have to accelerate." "Do it," I said. My voice came out steady, and I held on to that steadiness like it was the doorframe in a hurricane. He lifted the remote. The timer hit 0. The strobe went solid, a block of light. The siren dropped to a lower, hammering tone, the one they call warble in the catalog. He stepped onto the tape, closed the distance, and put his fingers, those soft, clean fingers, on my cheek like a coach. "Say yes, sir," he said gently. "Find the relief." I drew and shot the speaker. I don't know if it's a proud moment. It was necessary, and it turned the struggle from his ritual to my mess. The shot popped like a firecracker under all that noise. The ceiling speaker coughed sparks and died. The silence was obscene. The kid screamed like a kettle and dove for the desk, and I put a second shot into the jammer box I triangulated by the harmonic burn in my RF Scout. It blew like a drunk party bulb, and the world went real again. Ortega hit the front door like a train. The bay door chain shrieked. Pike's face went slack, not fear, not quite, disappointment, like a parent who can't believe a child would disobey in public. He moved finally, and when he moved, he was very fast. He went for me, not the exit, not a weapon me. He wanted the moment to end in his hands because that would make the narrative conservative again. We hit the floor in a tangle of tape and cheap training props. He grabbed for my wrist, and I broke his grip with the kind of hate they make you burn off in the gym after a bad shift. His thumb popped, he hissed and rolled, and the kid came at me with a plastic baton he swung like a baseball bat. I took it in the shoulder and tasted copper and drove my elbow into his sternum until his mouth remembered how to be empty of air. The Rangers flooded the bay. Ortega hauled the roll up half open with a chain and his whole spine. Sunlight knifed into the room. Pike crouched under the table, breath high. He smiled at me through the legs like we were still at the podium. He said, conversational, "You'll never find the others." He might be right. That lives in me in a way I won't write around. He had help. We got 3, and the center will peel away like something shed by a snake and grow elsewhere because authority is a drug and men like him can cook it from household ingredients. They took him. They took the kid. They took a woman from debrief who wouldn't look at me and who said, "Yes, sir," to every question a ranger asked, even the ones that weren't questions. She shook like a dog drying itself and then stood very still. Ortega put his jacket around her and didn't say a thing. I filed the report with a hand that couldn't quite stop vibrating. I typed fake police station, and it looked ridiculous until it wasn't. I typed brainwashing ritual and thought of a tape line on a concrete floor and a word that tasted like pennies when I refused to say it. Weeks later, I pulled a driver over on 287 for a tag, a woman with a coffee stain on her sleeve and a kid asleep in back with a baseball glove on his face. My radio worked. My body cam stayed alive. I said my script and meant it. She said, "Sir," once and caught herself and smiled, and then stopped smiling like maybe the word had learned the wrong lesson somewhere. I gave her a warning because the world doesn't need one more fine for breathing wrong. At home, I put my own hat on the peg and stood in my kitchen and listened to the house. I can hear when something is wrong now in a new way, like the pitch of a fluorescent tube going out. The word yes rings in my head sometimes with the wrong vowel. I say my own name out loud once a week, in the mirror, just to keep it tethered to a face that belongs to me. When my radio pops with static in a dead spot, I talk through it anyway. Unit 2 to 11, 10 to 60, I say. Santos. I put my unit number and my mile marker where the world can hear me. I stand off the V of my headlights, and I don't step on tape marks on floors. I tell people to keep their hands visible, and I keep my own where I can see them too. I don't know where Marisol is. I tell myself she found her way back out of a taped square and into a grocery store, and when a man in a polo told her to stand on a line, she said no and her voice didn't shake. It's the lie I can live with. The old substation is chained again, padlocked with county seals, a notice on the door about evidence and trespass. Teenagers will break in and dare each other to stand on the tape some Halloween. Maybe they'll laugh. I hope they do. I hope the tape loses its power and becomes just glue on concrete. I hope the next person who hears a PA instruction in the dark looks to the badge and not the confidence. And if a black Charger slides up behind me again with a star that's almost right and a voice that thinks it knows my name, I'll answer to my own first. Then I'll shoot the speaker. I-40 at night is a ribbon on the panhandle where your headlights feel like they're sewing the world back together one stitch at a time. The trucks come in caravans. The wind turns them into buildings that drift. You learn the mile markers like birthdays. You know where the frontage roads dive under old bridges, where the wind farms blink red in unison like a choreographed warning from giants who learned manners. I'm Trooper Catherine Morris, DPS, Amarillo District. It was a blue sky afternoon that slid into one of those long orange evenings where the horizon won't quite let go. I'd had 3 routine stops and 1 overturned cattle trailer that needed more apologies than citations. At 1942, LPR pinged a gray Prius registered to a Dr. Marcus Webb. Expired inspection, 2 months. Not exactly the stuff of legend. I picked him up eastbound near Groom, drifting a foot onto the shoulder every couple miles like he'd fallen in love with the rumble strip. I lit him up, eased him onto the shoulder where a windbreak of ragged mesquite took some of the gusts. Textbook angle on the cruiser, spotlight to the mirror, body cam chirp. He pulled over cleanly. No sudden door open. No frantic hands. Just a silhouette, both hands high at the wheel, the head tilt of a man in glasses reading his own dashboard like it's a friend. He rolled the window down before I got there. The smell of peppermint rolled out, strong and deliberate. He'd wiped the interior with it. A small oscillating fan on his dash moved it in little measured pulses. His voice, when he spoke, was the kind that belongs to libraries and tenure tracks. "Evening, Trooper," he said. "Thank you for stopping me. People don't usually thank me for that. Afternoon, sir. License and insurance, please." Dr. Marcus Webb, he said as if the degree were part of the name. He passed his license and an insurance card with a hand that was steady and pale, nails scrubbed, no tremor. He met my eyes briefly, then just off them, the way someone does when they've practiced looking safe. His cabin looked staged. A legal pad on the passenger seat lined with neat columns. A little digital metronome, the kind piano teachers put on desks, ticked a faint 60 BPM near the center vent. A dash-mounted tablet showing a strip of moving dots that crawled right to left in a slow, satisfying wave. LED strips lined the dash lip, not flashing. The law against emergency color imitation is clear, but glowing warm white at a level that turned the cabin into a dim box. The Prius hummed. His hazard blinkers stayed off. The only rhythm belonged to him. "Where are you headed tonight, Dr. Webb?" "Amarillo," he said. "Interview." He smiled with a doctor's confidence. "My research is on highway hypnosis. I give talks to trucking companies, fatigue, vigilance, all that. I drift when I'm thinking about it, which is funny, in a tragic sense." I glanced at my mirror. Traffic slid by in spaced packs. The wind farm lights along the horizon blinked in their agreed-upon cadence. Sometimes they desync, and it looks like breathing. He had chosen a shoulder with no immediate camera coverage, one of those little gaps you only know with time. Peppermint sharpened the air, clinical and insistent. The metronome ticked. I felt it settle into my chest, then my jaw. "Do you know your inspection's expired?" I asked. "I do," he said, contrite in a way that doesn't ask forgiveness so much as expected as part of the ritual. "You can cite me. I deserve it." I kept his card and license and stepped back to my unit to run him. MDT populated clean, no warrants, no wants. Google memory from some training day bubbled. His name connected to a faculty page once, West Texas A&M Psychology, removed after IRB concerns. I didn't chase it on my phone. You don't get to be that casual on the shoulder. I watched him in my side mirror. He stayed still. The oscillating fan nodded with a little hypnotist's patience. Back at his window, pen ready, I noticed a new addition. A small LED ring suction cup to the windshield just left of his rear view, no bigger than a silver dollar. It glowed a fraction too bright for the dusk and cycled, slow, like a camera indicator that didn't belong to any camera I knew. My body cam timestamp rolled. It would see what I saw. The ring's light found the edge of my retina and came back as a pulse. "Dr. Webb," I said, "what's the device on your windshield?" He didn't look at it. He looked at me, eyes warm behind wire frames. "Pupillometry light. I test microsaccades. There's good evidence that fixation instability predicts microsleeps." "Turn it off," I said. He did, instantly, smile intact. The cabin felt like it exhaled. "Do you ever feel it?" he asked, tone like coffee talk. "The slide? You're there, and then you're 100 yards further, and you couldn't quote a single thought from the in-between." He made a little circling gesture with his index finger, the metronome's hand in human form. "Highway hypnosis. It isn't sleep, not exactly. It's task-positive network domination with reduced salience. The world goes gentle. It forgives you. Keep your hands where I can see them," I said. He did, palms open on the wheel. There was a ring of faded tape residue on the plastic at 10 o'clock, a perfect circle, like something used to be affixed there and had been peeled off for company. "I give talks to troopers sometimes," he said cheerfully, and named a nearby county I knew. "They always look offended when I say you're the most at-risk group for what I study. Routine erodes vigilance. It isn't a moral failing. It's a cost of doing the job well for too long." "You drifted over the fog line 3 times," I said. "That's my concern tonight. I'm going to issue a warning on the inspection, get it handled in the next 7 days. You'll need to step out." "Of course," he said, like we'd coordinated it earlier. He opened the door with a deliberate slowness that read as control, not fear, and stepped into the wind, jacket flicking. He was 10 years older than me, maybe 15, and his posture had the kind of careful you get when you've tried to rebuild trust. On the shoulder, the wind threw grit. The metronome's tick carried. He watched my lips when I spoke. When I adjusted my stance, he mirrored a fraction, a therapist's parlor trick. He smelled like peppermint and the fancy hand soap you get in gift baskets. He kept his hands visible and his face open, and something underneath the performance pressed like a thumb. "Place your hands on the hood for me," I said. "We'll do a quick pat for weapons." "Of course," he said again. He placed his palms and spread his feet. Calm, skull close-cropped. No scars. He hummed once, low, a note that matched the metronome. Halfway through the pat, my radio hiccuped. Not static, not a dead zone. A soft glide into nothing. I glanced at my unit. The light bar still pulsed. The body cam made its little saving chirp, then went steady. No reason to panic. Human factors. Electromagnetic whim. Wind. "You can relax," he said quietly, and the sentence wasn't content so much as cadence. "There's no one else here. It's just us." "Keep your mouth shut," I said, not unkind. He obeyed, and his breath out matched the metronome, tick 2 for 1. I finished, found nothing, stepped back. He turned around slow, hands in the open, eyes on my forehead instead of my eyes, the kind of respectful that misses on purpose. "Trooper," he said, unblinking, "could I show you a thing? A very simple thing. 30 seconds. It will help you not die." "I'm not interested." "You are," he said, not smug, not pleading, as if he were reading off a screen where my answer was already displayed. "You're conscientious. You're proud, but you like tools. 30 seconds. In your unit, with your camera." No, my mouth said it. My neck didn't feel like my mouth. The peppermint smell made the world feel clinically correct. He didn't move. Neither did I. The red blink of a far-off turbine winked on, off. The wind smoothed. I became suddenly, absurdly aware of the literal taste of my own tongue. He took a small half-step, nothing that would trigger distance proximity training, and held up his empty hands at chest height, fingers spaced, as if measuring something invisible. "You've had long days. You've put repetition in your bones. I want to give you a very short practice to move your focus from external to internal to external again. Teaching your attention to breathe saves lives. Back up, I said. He held the distance. He did not blink. Back. Up. His eyes warmed in a tiny apology. He nodded once, the way a professor does when a student mispronounces a term and the professor decides to let it lie. You already know it, he said softly. 4 things you can see, 3 you can feel, 2 you can hear, 1 you can taste. You teach it to victims on the roadside when they're hyperventilating. You've said it before with this same jaw. He touched his own jaw lightly. It works because it gives the brain a sequence. People love a sequence. Air felt thin. I realized I was holding some breath and let it go. He tilted his head. May I guide you through it once so your body remembers it better? He didn't wait for the no he knew I'd say. 4 things you can see. I looked away from him on principle. I saw mesquite scratching the idea of a fence. I saw a plastic grocery bag snag on barbed wire, ballooned and empty. I saw the zipper sound waves in the mirror of a semi a quarter mile back. I saw the small LED ring on his windshield that he had turned off, and in seeing it, felt the echo of its earlier pulse, like motion sickness. 3 things you can feel, he murmured, with the gentle authority of a man who has never been told no by a room he thinks he's earned. Your duty belt riding your right hip, the breeze on your throat, the texture of your pen clip under your finger where you keep resting it. My fingers startled away from the pen clip like it had been caught doing something wrong. Stop. 2 things you can hear, he said, softness edging. He kept his voice at a volume that slid in under my training. The non-threatening, the non-escalating, the slow. My voice. The metronome, even here, just under the wind. Your brain already syncs to it. That's how we are built, to save energy. And 1 thing you can taste, peppermint, which is good. It staves off the aftertaste of adrenaline. Enough. It came rough. I stepped backward on purpose to reset my body. Muscle memory helps when your brain is trying to take a nap in front of you. My hand landed on my siren control through the open cruiser window. I stabbed the yelp. The sudden crisp 2-tone cut the world open. Webb flinched. I saw it. A thin fissure in the confidence, the kind a man earns when his scripts skip. His smile returned quickly. Rude, he said, but effective. See, a tool. Go sit in your car, I said. Hands on the wheel. Don't touch anything. He obeyed. He moved slow, as if modeling compliance for a classroom. How to be stopped. He sat. He put his hands on the wheel exactly at 10 and 2. He smiled like he was humoring me and like he meant it. The metronome's tick persisted, soft as breathing. Back in my unit, I radioed the stop again. The channel answered, fat and healthy. My body cam feed was clean, the timestamp a cheerful frame by frame. I thumbed my phone and typed Marcus Webb Psychology IRB and got enough to sharpen the edges. A news blip from 2 years ago about non-consensual field research involving attention management on public roads. A terse university statement about safety and compliance. No charges. A quiet resignation. He had changed job titles from associate professor to consultant. When I returned to his window with the pad printed and waiting, the peppermint was stronger, like he'd added a few drops to a vent. The LED ring was off. The metronome ticked a little quicker. He didn't look at me. He looked at the horizon and then at my shoulder mic and then, finally, directly into my eyes in a way that wasn't hostile so much as testing fit. I apologize for the theatrics, he said. You must get that a lot. Men thinking their ideas will save your life. I get men who think their ideas will save theirs, I said. Sign here acknowledging receipt. He signed. His handwriting was small and perfect, like a supremely confident serial number. When he handed the pad back, his fingers brushed the pen clip. My throat tightened like a muscle misfiring. I made myself blink in a pattern, left, right, learned on a course about breaking visual lock. The metronome ticked. The wind farm lights blinked. My heart went stubborn and steady out of spite. You're very good, he said. Better than most. His tone made it sound like an A- that could be coaxed to A. Can I make one request? For your safety? No. When you leave me, he said, ignoring the no as if it were manners. Don't look at the LED billboards just east of McLean. They have an optokinetic ad tonight. Red and white stripes scrolling. It's a poor man's piano drum. It can induce space out in under 30 seconds if the viewer is primed by suggestion. I'm not primed, I said, and you're not my safety officer. He smiled, almost kindly. Everyone's primed. It's what culture is. I cleared the stop. He merged back onto I-40 with his blinker on exactly 7 clicks, as if counting were part of how he earned permission to move. I sat the shoulder for 3 minutes and felt my own breath curl in the cab and didn't like it. I wrote the narrative of the stop in my notes, as if writing it made my body my own again. He was right about the billboards east of McLean. 3 in a row on a long, straight stretch. 1 for a truck stop, 1 for a casino across the line, 1 for a marketing firm that had decided stripes were their brand. I passed them at 65, then 60. The red/white bars scrolled smoothly in a way that didn't belong to the wind. My eyes wanted to glide and keep gliding. My peripheral field softened like it had been encouraged to be kind. I turned my head to the left, forcing the field to break, and the world snapped back like a rubber band. I said out loud, in the unit, 4 things I can see, and hated that I borrowed his sequence. The next night, a trucker called in an odd stop. A white panel van on the shoulder under the US 287 flyover. Hazard lights in a pulse not standard. A trooper, with no hat, speaking to a woman at the rear doors. The trucker had a dash cam. The frame grab gave us nothing but taillights and the suggestion of a logo. A circle, 2 letters inside. MW? Or maybe a stylized wave. The shoulder choice was smart. The van half under the bridge, between cameras, in a slice of radio shadow where one repeater hands off to another and everyone's voice gets briefly less urgent. I didn't sleep. I drove the frontage roads in a slow figure 8 and counted blinks on wind turbines like I could make the panhandle keep a beat I recognized. When the call came about a missing woman whose last text to a friend read, "Pulled over by a trooper, but he's nice," my mouth went dry. Half an hour later, the friend forwarded the text to our tip line with a location pin. The pin dropped not on a shoulder, but on a frontage road turnout where an old rest area used to be before budget cuts turned it into a gravel patch with a faded picnic table. We found peppermint on the table. We found a small strip heater plugged into a generator and aimed at a camping chair. We found a collapsible LED ring light scorched at the edge, like it had been turned up too far, and learned a lesson. We found tire impressions from a Prius, then the wash of a van that erased them like a parent wiping a child's mouth. He had escalated. Or maybe he had simply moved from pilot data to field trial. The Rangers and I went to his Amarillo address. Apartment near the hospital district. Plants on the balcony watered with the precision of someone who feeds habits. He wasn't there. On the kitchen counter, a legal pad, columns labeled LAT, LON, wind speed, subject hashtag, responsiveness. The writing neat as before. The last row half filled, 35. 24, minus 100. 85, 126. 9 miles per hour. F-27, June 10th. He was staging experiments. He was watching our roads the way we watch deer at dawn. Patterns, habits, watering holes. We put out a bolo. We mapped every cutout on I-40 between Shamrock and Adrian. We parked units in the boring places at boring angles. And because my anger makes me practical, I went to the storage unit complexes that rent by the month near abandoned frontage stretches and asked who'd taken units with power. That's a cop's luck thing. You ask where the wood is stacked near the fence, and sometimes the arsonist is right there with cans. On the third facility, a manager with a vape and a nervous habit pointed to Unit B-14. "Dr. Guy," she said. "Nice. Pays on time. Always peppermint." We popped the roll up. Inside was a mobile lab in miniature. A folding table with a laptop, a thrift store recliner, a ring light on a stand, a wall of acoustic foam panels tacked with care, a white noise generator, a portable EEG headband in its case, a spray bottle labeled with a Sharpie, mint, a stack of pamphlets, highway safety attention workshop, with a clip art seal and a font that wanted you to relax, a cheap camcorder on a tripod pointed at the chair. On the laptop, folders labeled S1 through S29. The thumbnails were faces, all women, all under the flat light of a ring, pupils a hair wider than the ambient should have encouraged. I didn't open any. I didn't need the content to know the doctrine. Build a room where your voice is the loudest. Bring the road's rhythms with you. Wear authority lightly. Ask for something small first, and then a little more. The bolo hit at 1:13, Prius eastbound, 133. I was close enough to taste the dust when I got there. He had parked just beyond a bridge where the earth fell away into a shallow drainage full of paper cups and the bones of weeds. The Prius idled, hazard lights dead, interior glow. The passenger door was cracked open, an invitation. Peppermint burned my nose before I took a step. "Dr. Webb," I called. "Catherine Morris. DPS. Step out with your hands where I can see them." He stepped out of the ditch, not the car, as if he'd grown there. Calm as ever. Hands up. Glasses reflecting my spotlight. No hat. No weapon visible. The wind took his jacket edge and made it look like a cape until it didn't. He smiled the same classroom smile. "Trooper," he said warmly. "We keep meeting in the worst lighting." "Where is she?" My voice came out flat. My hands were steady. That felt like a lie my hands told on my behalf. He lifted his chin toward the ditch. "Safe," he said. "Learning. I'm showing her how not to die of her own attention. She's very compliant. That's not her fault." "On your knees," I said. He didn't move. My siren yelped once, a habit now, and he flinched again, the crack behind the plaster. "On your..." He reached slowly to his shirt pocket. I brought the sight to his sternum and shouted. He ignored the shout, so I aimed at bone, small as the button he touched, and he froze with his fingers resting on the fabric. He drew out not a weapon, but a little key fob, cheap plastic with a single switch. "If I press this," he said, "your radio will sound like bees for 20 seconds and then return. Enough to introduce uncertainty. You'll shout more. She'll hear your shout more than my voice. She will become frightened. Fright narrows attention in unhelpful ways. Put it on the ground." He set it at his feet, slow as a man lowering a newborn into a crib. "Could I tell you a true thing?" he asked. "I have never hurt anyone. I've only asked their attention to work with me. I don't need to touch them. That's what a culture is, a series of preloaded commands." "On your knees." He did, finally, settling on the gravel as if finding a meditation pose. He closed his eyes absurdly. "You're different," he said softly. "You don't like how much of you the job makes automatic. You think that makes you safer. It makes you tastier." I moved to cuff him. His hands, when I touched them, were cold as porcelain but quick. He rolled against my shin, a practiced wrestler's shift, and the ground went out from under my center mass. My knee hit gravel, stars white as turbine lights. He popped up and slid toward the ditch, quick without looking like he'd hurried. "Catherine," he said without looking back, and my name in his mouth felt like a hook. I didn't follow him down blind. I thumbed my radio to open mic and hit the siren steady, wail full, a flood. The sound obliterated finesse. It was ugly and necessary. I grabbed the flare kit from my trunk, cracked one, hurled it into the ditch. Magnesium white cut the peppermint haze and made the shallow drainage a theater with no corners. A woman in a folding chair flinched and turned her face away from the light, eyes red-rimmed, hair damp with sweat. A ring light glowed near her cheek. Webb crouched 2 yards off, one hand raised, palm out at her, the other making a shallow, circling motion in the air, metronome without instrument. "Back!" I shouted. "Hands up. Ma'am, look at me." Webb did not. "Catherine," he said again, louder, to get my own attention to pivot. "You can't keep this up. The siren will tire you. It exhausts the very circuits you need to make good choices." "I make great choices," I said, and shoulder-checked him into the culvert wall. He hit and absorbed it like a man who had thought about pain and filed it somewhere useful. I put him on his stomach in the grit and cuffed him while he laughed once, a little surprised exhale, and then lay silent, as if trying not to wake whatever he thought he'd put to sleep in people. The woman shook and stuttered. He said I could rest. She managed, voice thick with that awful combination of gratitude and terror that parasites call success. "You can't," I said. "In the ambulance." Backup came hard and fast. The windmills blinked like a metronome with a conscience. We pulled the chair up. We collected the ring light, the white noise generator, the portable heater, the spray bottle. We photographed the peppermint bottle like it mattered more than it did. Maybe it did. We put Dr. Marcus Webb in a car where the cage rattled and the seat was sticky and the world wasn't arranged to flatter him. He watched me through the window with those therapists' eyes like he was taking notes for a future me that doesn't exist. At the station, the interview went the way they do with men who believe the word ethics should bend to voice. He spoke softly. He asked the interviewer questions. He said the phrase informed consent as though we had misinformed ourselves by existing on the roads he loves. The charges will do what charges do. Lawyers will make a shape out of his intentions that feels smaller than the harm. The women will want to speak, and some will decide not to. The peppermint smell in my unit lasted 3 shifts. I could taste it even with the vents off, as if my nose remembered a lesson I never wanted. I still run I-40. You have to keep running the road that tried to make you forget how. When the billboards scroll red and white, I turn my head and read the fuel gauge out loud. When I stop a car where the windmills breathe together, I shut off my metronome of thoughts by doing ugly math in my head. 7 times 13, then 7 times 14, because numbers said in a voice I know pull me back harder than any technique. I keep ammonia inhalants in my door pocket now. If I feel the slide, I crack one and let the sharp slap remind me that smell is older than language. Sometimes I catch myself counting blinks, turbines, hazard lights, the rise and fall of a chest in my rear view, and I stop and say my badge number out loud and my kid's middle name. I angle my cruiser the way they taught me, and I do not let anyone guide me through a sequence I didn't choose. If a man with a professor's voice asks me to list 4 things I can see, I list them without taking my eyes off his hands. And the first thing is always my sight picture, and the second is always the distance to my siren switch. I don't think Webb wanted to kill anyone. That's the sentence that curdles in your gut. He wanted obedience dressed as care. He wanted the road to be a lab where he could be right about people. He wanted our habits to be his instruments. That's a kind of violence I have words for now, and I don't plan to forget them. On quiet nights when the panhandle goes black and the wind farms blink like sleeping giants with perfect timing, I roll the window down and let the air knock at my face, and I count what's mine. 1 mile marker, 1 breath, 1 name. Then I say it all backwards, just to be sure the sequence belongs to me.